and start. Okay. Here's the thing is I'm trying this out because I always have a problem where we do the interviews, we record it and all that, but I forget roughly when during the interview stuff happens. So I'm gonna start a timer along with the recording. That way I know, 10 minutes into the recording, it's this.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Anyways. So, I guess we should just go ahead and start from somewhere in the beginning of when did you... So, you started with Up Your Arsenal, right?
Yes, I started the very deep lore. The deep Zem lore is that I started speedrunning, very lightly speedrunning Up Your Arsenal. You could almost call it casual speedruns of Up Your Arsenal back in 2008.
Cool.
That was my earliest involvement with Ratchet speedrunning. It was very, very low tech, very low. I don't know. It was very much like a one-man effort to try to just see how low I could push the time, because at that point there were no recorded runs anywhere.
Yeah.
And the most I could find was maybe some stuff on YouTube, but largely it was just me sitting down and trying to see how low I could push things. I didn't really make any concerted efforts to actually get good at the game until 2014.
Gotcha.
I had a brief period in 2008, a brief period in 2012, early 2013, and then October 2014 is when I became a bona fide member of the Ratchet community.
Gotcha. Okay. And you mainly stuck with Ouya, right?
Yes, for the first year and a half. So until roughly, I want to say late spring, early summer 2016. I might be a little bit off on the dates there. I might be a little bit off on the dates there, but that sounds about right. That's the first time I ever made my first venture into Rack 2.
Okay, cool. Because I was leaning around 2016 based on your speedrun.com profile.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So, there's a couple of things we need to go over with the game itself, right? So we've done a video on Rack 1, so I'm pretty familiar with Rack 1. But tell me a little bit about Rack 2 and how it's different, right? Because in the first game, it's like, all right, it's all about building momentum with like PDA, like the long jumps, right? PDA stops to like get more and more and more momentum, and then like doing, all that kind of stuff. But then this one's like, oh, we just have charge boots from the beginning.
Yes, yeah, the charge boots really do effectively change everything, and even without the charge boots, the movement is hardly, I would go so far as to say barely even remotely the same as Rack 1. There's some stuff that carries over, essentially just, pack. You can build up momentum the same way that you do in Rack 1, but it's not nearly as potent and it's much more difficult. Whereas in Rack 1, you just have to stay neutral on the analog stick. In Rack 2, you have to very carefully time your side flips with the helipack, chain them together to build momentum. You can do a little bit with the thruster pack, but it's kind of the same in Rack 1, where the helipack is the only real way to build momentum.
Right.
However, if you're just looking, any percent categories in Rack 2 use a lot of pack movement, and you'll notice even just the difference between those, the pack movement in Rack 2 and the pack movement in Rack 1, it's night and day. They're not used even remotely the same.
Okay. I should watch one of those just so I have a better idea.
Well, since I can take the opportunity to shill here anyway, there is the Rack 2 All Platinum Bolts GDQ race coming up between myself and Dill Wingo. We're numbers 1 and 2 in the category right now, so we'll be doing a neat little race of that very, very soon. I think in a month and a half or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be looking for it. Okay. So there's that, and one of the things that I've found from some initial research is that that game's fucking busted. And people knew that way back in the day. Like, I'm seeing videos from like 2007 and stuff where people were just like, yeah, we can wrench climb, we can get into the Insomniac Museum like way earlier. There's a bunch of glitches that people are pretty aware of really, really early on, right?
Yeah, it's the advances that have happened in the past, I want to say 4 years. It's not to say that there haven't been that many advances. It's more so that all the major stuff was found very early on. Like you're saying, the wall climbs. The wall climbs used to be a much more important part of the route. Nowadays, they're not as huge, largely because of the existence of proxies, which I imagine we'll get into at some point later anyway. But yeah, like it, Insomniac Museum glitch creating the NG Plus category proper was found very, very early on. I want to say like maybe even as early as 2014 or sooner. I'm seeing runs on speedrun.com from 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been around here for a long time, even as far back as what's this last place one? July 18th, 2012. So yeah, people knew about it for sure.
Which one was that? Deathfire?
That one, it's 69th place on SRCom, which is a very nice place to be at, if you ask me. But it's Tika Tetu 1000, whose name I literally never even heard of, but he was a Japanese runner.
Okay, there we go. Oh yeah, I see it now.
Yeah.
I was thinking of No IMG. Sorry.
But yes, yeah. So of course that's the reason why No IMG exists in the first place, is because that was found so early on. Deathfire 123 is definitely the most important starting point for any person delving deep into the history of No IMG. That really was pretty much the first documented run that I think most people saw, myself included, as well as a lot of the earlier runners like I'm just trying to pull names out of a hat. The Rixer, he was running before I was. Insomniac Nintendo, FOAS to a very, very, very small degree, if I recall correctly. But yeah, there were a lot of people who were running pretty early on, but Skritler speedrun is as well, or Skritler now. I think he just shortened his name too. Curtly, FS Teninator, people like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of spieling on and on at this point, but you get the idea.
Yeah. I get you. Yeah, because I can't find any recorded footage or any other runs before that one, which is weird. Because the guy even says in his run, he's like, "Oh yeah, this stuff isn't going to be breaking any records or anything." And I'm like, "Okay," so that kind of implies that there are records, that people are kind of more or less keeping track of this. But I can't find anything. So
yeah, I think the only place that you would be able to find something like that is either I don't know. I'm thinking like maybe Speed Demos Archive. There might have been something, or like I know for certain that there was a Skype group back in the day with a lot of the older runners.
Might be that.
I know that Cypress, for example, or Sippy as we call him, has been around for forever.
Yeah.
And he had world record once upon a time, so maybe that's where it came from. But I think Deathfire's run is even before that, if I recall correctly.
It's like 2012, I think.
Yeah, and that was like around the time the Skype group started forming in the first place. But that was mostly Ratchet 1 stuff with I think maybe a splash of Rack 2 stuff from time to time.
Yeah. Well, it's not terribly important. That is a good place to start.
Yeah.
So, if I think we talked about this a little bit in the first video, but I think it's more pertinent for this game than it is for the first game. How that Silence Ouya run really influenced the movement tech in rack speed running in general, right?
Yes. Yeah. That I mean, that was actually since the Rack 1 video was made. I mean, I don't know if you guys know this or not. Every year we do community awards to recognize the achievements of a lot of the people in the community. So, we do like Strat of the Year, Strat Hunter of the Year, Run of the Year, Runner of the Year, so on and so forth. That's fun. Yeah, it's a fun little award show that we do before the new year rolls in.
Okay.
And so since it was, last year was the end of the decade, we did Run of the Decade. I think Strat of the Decade as well. We did a couple decade specific things, and Run of the Decade, of course, went to Silence's 3746, the one that stood for so long as the world record in Up Your Arsenal. So really, the importance and significance of that run cannot be understated enough, or cannot be overstated in any way, shape, or form. I don't know. You get what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the fact that everybody's movement. I mean, depending on how you, depending on the language that people use, you might hear people say things as strongly as everyone's movement was fraudulent until came around. And to some, I actually agree for the most part. I mean, I think that Silence really kind of showed the level to which we didn't even come close to understanding the games.
Yeah,
which is kind of insane that any one person could, push the meta of an entire community so far, almost exclusively by himself.
Yeah. Well, that's not to like take away from your statement. It's a little bit loaded because most of that stuff was discovered by the multiplayer community, right? And
it's true. It's true.
Granted, he's the one who showed it to the speedrunning community, and that's more so the important bridge. Right?
Yes, I guess that is a pretty fair way of putting it. Credit where credit is due. It was all found there, and he was the one who kind of reverse engineered it. Because even if you know about the multiplayer movement, which frankly a lot of people did, people didn't even think you could translate it into speedruns because the way that they function is completely different. Believe it or not, the way that, like, if I were to go into the movement or the multiplayer settings in Ouya right now and just go into a level and try to mess around, I would look like I just started picking up the game yesterday. Like my movement would look terrible because it's not totally different, but it is different enough that it's not so shocking that people hadn't figured out how to put it into the single player world just yet.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had a lot of personal experience, so it doesn't say that connection. I wouldn't make that connection because it would seem that you just did the same movement, but I guess there's more to it than just that.
Yeah, it's really what it boils down to is that multiplayer is in lock strafe only, and largely people played in third person. There are still some differences. Don't get me wrong, like the way that it feels, the way that a lot of the movement behaves. But in lock strafe specifically, a lot of the stuff works kind of strangely. It's almost like I don't know. It almost would look like it's from a totally different speedrun altogether. The way the movement functions in lock strafe.
Okay, cool. All right. So, but yeah, Silence brings that over, and it's like everyone's minds are blown. You said at the front, I was going to say fraudulent was a very fun word that you used, but I get what you mean, where it's like, you guys are fucking clowns, dude. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. Like, step aside. Let me show you what a real speedrunner looks like, which is kind of a Chad Thundercock kind of.
No, and that's exactly right. I mean, it took to give you an idea of how influential that run was. I mean, we found that run in, I think I want to say like April or May or June of 2015 is when we found that, and it took an entire year for anyone to even come close to beating it. I mean, I remember April 2nd, 2015 was when I finally ended up beating Silence's run after 6 straight months of grinding.
Jesus. That's nuts.
So yeah, it really was a really difficult run to beat. It definitely. Sorry, I don't. I know I keep talking about how sick this run is, but I really just want to hammer home that it was a ridiculous run for its time.
No, we're definitely going to be hammering that in, I think.
Yeah.
But so I guess, like I said, this is more pertinent to Rack 2 than it was to Rack 1. Not, just because we have like charge boots and things in the third game, right? In the second game, that's more pertinent to Rack 2.
Yes.
So can you tell me more or less, like, just describe some of the basic movement ideas that Silence showed off that are applicable to Rack 2?
Yeah. So there's actually a very, to this day, it's still very relevant resource that we have in the community, which is the Rixer's movement tutorial.
Oh yeah.
Specifically, it's advertised as an Ouya movement tutorial, but a lot of the movement between Ouya carries, or a lot of movement in Ouya carries over to Rack 2 as well. And so, you have a lot of stuff like neutral long jumps, whip jumps, I'm trying to think, like just a lot of movement, like neutral tech with the charge boots, where you cancel a charge using a weapon and then translate that stored momentum into some other form of movement. So in Ratchet 2, a lot of what happens is, you'll have, I don't know, you don't really do neutral long jumps as much in Rack 2 because you don't get Clank in no IMG.
Right.
But you can do decoy canceled side flips. You can do, so they're called whip jumps in Ouya, but and we kind of call them, I mean, nowadays I think we call them wrench jumps properly in Rack 2, but for a long time we just called it whip jumps regardless of what game you were doing, because it functions the same way, where if you're charging in midair, if you mash square, you will swing your wrench in the air as if you're grounded, and you can side flip out of that as well. Or you can side flip out of it, you can double jump out of it, whatever you need. Right. But essentially, a lot of it was just charge boot technology that involved charging forward, storing your momentum, translating it into a side flip of some sort, or some way of, like carrying that momentum into another thing, like a wrench swing or, what have you. Okay. Which is different. The reason why that's so important, the charge boots are so great. I mean, you've kind of already touched on this, but to give you the exact science of it, at least in the original trilogy, Ratchet has the same speed cap across all three games. It's 0.43 meters per second. I did not lab that personally. People with a much deeper understanding of TAS technology found the calculated values of that. But the thing is, in Rack 1, the idea is that you're supposed to store up enough momentum to try to get to as close as 0.43 and maintain it as humanly possible. But the charge boots instantly rocket you forward at 0.43 meters per second. So you don't ever have to worry about storing momentum or carrying, all these things. Your angles don't even need to be as good. And in fact, the way you can do things is sometimes in Rack 2 quite sloppy. You kind of just want to charge forward as quickly as possible. If you have to adjust your angle, you can. But ideally, the idea is reducing as much time between charge boot inputs as possible.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. If we're already going top speed, it's just like, just go. Yes. Because you can turn with the charge boots, right? It's not they're not great, but you do have some control.
Yeah, that's a major difference between Rack 2 and Ouya, is that in Ouya you can always turn Ratchet. You have some degree of control over Ratchet even while you're charging, but in Rack 2, whatever angle you go at, you're kind of committed to that angle. You don't have as much liberty to turn Ratchet back and forth and kind of try to adjust it on the fly. So a lot of the meta nowadays in Rack 2, and I know we'll get to this later, but a lot of the metas that you see coming out of people like Fear is that you kind of see more emphasis on setting up your angles while you're still doing the previous thing. So it's kind of just like, hyper striking in a very specific direction, or turning Ratchet as quickly as you can to try to again, just reducing time between charges, because in the past, it was kind of just like, oh, well, if you have to do this, take a second to set it up if you need to. But now you don't have that same luxury. The game's too optimized now.
Yeah. Okay. So you said 2015 April was when that Silent Throne was found?
This was actually April. I want to say April 2014. Let me look this
2014.
up.
2014. Okay.
Silence3246 is his username. Let me see if I can find him on YouTube.
I know I've seen the run. I don't remember the dates in particular. I just want to make sure my timeline is accurate.
Oh, okay. So the 3746, now retimed to 3727, was done on January. I'm not 100% sure if I'm reading this date correctly. Or not January, my goodness. I'm not sure if I'm reading this date correctly because I forget whether they do day or month first. But it says 2014-6-5. So I believe that would be June 5th.
Okay.
So yeah, June 5th of 2014 is when that revolutionary run happened.
Is that when it was found or when it happened?
Let me see.
Sorry.
According to YouTube upload, it was uploaded on June 5th, 2014. And it was discovered not long after.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I think I have was it Nuka who found that?
Yeah, I actually think if I recall correctly now, again, I might have my timeline a little bit crossed up, but if I recall correctly, what happened was he had other runs that he uploaded before that one, and Nuka found those ones. And then I think that may have been in April or May that Nuka found Silence in the first place. And then in June, Silence posted that 3746.
And because he already knew about him, Nuka instantly saw that video.
Yeah, everyone knew the instant it happened.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right. So I guess we can kind of go over the history and we can talk about some of these parts here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, what's it, 2014, right? So Ricky shows up in 2015.
Yes.
And he kind of, I mean, I'm looking at the speedrun.com one. I think there's some videos that aren't on there because the record goes from a 35-25 to a 32-42. And I don't know. I feel like Ricky probably had a couple other ones in there, but he submitted a 32-42, which is like 3 minutes faster, right? And I think that's roughly around when that stuff was found.
Now, I want to say that is a little incorrect. I think the record. Oh wait, actually, when was the? Do you happen to know the exact timeline of when Ricky submitted that 32?
2015, July 28th.
Oh, okay. So maybe that is accurate. I'm not 100%. Let me check this here real quick. Because I'm seeing that Sippy submitted a 3250 about a month after. It might actually be possible. Now, if I recall correctly, Insomniac Nintendo may have been the world record holder at the time. I could be wrong about that. I mean, I'm sure the statistics page on speedrun.com would know better than I would. But I remember... What's that?
Skrittler?
Skrittler, yeah.
Okay.
3520. Yeah, okay. So this is actually a pretty funny story. So it turns out, I'm pretty sure that world record that it shows Skrittler having wasn't actually his world record. Now this is a pretty interesting story.
Okay.
Skrittler, I believe, timed his run using Speed Demo's archive, but IN, who had a 3531, used RTA. So his run was effectively faster than Skrit's because Skrit saved, quote unquote, saved 15 seconds off of not timing the beginning. So IN's time never got retimed, I think. So I actually vividly remember at the very least this interaction happening. Skrittler finishes his run. He's like, "Oh yeah, dude, I got world record." And then IN's like, "Actually, I still have world record because you did yours SDA." And then Skrittler literally just said, "Fuck this," and then just stopped playing. He was so pissed that IN essentially cucked him out of a world record. And he just outright stopped.
Well, you got to play by the rules, dude.
Well, I mean, we were all friends. It was all in good fun, but I remember Skrittler just being very pissed about that. Even to this day, I still remember how annoyed he was. But yeah, that might actually be accurate. I think, there's a gap in my memory because I was so focused on Ouya, I was barely ever paying much attention to the Rack 2 side of things. I do remember, though, that as soon as Ricky came in, he kind of just ran train on everybody. And the reason is, and I'll tell you what it is, it wasn't even that the movement tech really advanced all that much as far as like stuff being found. Well, I guess that is part of it, but it's more so that the movement had existed for a while, but was never incorporated into Rack 2. So yeah, I think what you're saying is accurate in so much that people's movement wasn't up to date, but it doesn't. Just saying that doesn't really paint the whole picture. It really very much was the people who ran Ouya had a huge leg up on the people who only ran Rack 2 because we had to compete against silence. And so if you wanted to be good at Ouya, you had to learn all this ridiculous movement tech at the time.
Yeah.
And so Ricky, he got world record in Ouya any percent, I believe only one time. And largely he was kind of behind the curve. If I recall correctly, he was always like a step or two below the top people in Ouya NG+. But even that was already good enough for him to come into Rack 2 with his knowledge of Ouya movement and just absolutely destroy everyone. Because nobody else had movement nearly as refined as the Ouya runners back then when it came to Rack 2 stuff. So Ricky comes in with all of his Ouya knowledge and just, if I remember correctly, within like a week or two of running the category, just blows everyone out of the water.
That sounds about right. That sounds like Ricky. Okay, cool. I need to make a note of that. So,
entire time that Ricky is just running roughshod over everybody in whatever speed game, he's just listening to Nas in the background.
Yeah, that's a very Ricky kind of aesthetic. I think this is even in the days before he got into hip hop, which is another piece of deep lore. If I remember correctly, he didn't start getting into hip hop all that often until like I want to say around 2016, like around the time that he started running Rack 1. I could be wrong about that. I might be misremembering, but I remember being Ricky's friend before he got into hip hop, and then kind of seeing his whole evolution of him becoming a hip hop head. It was actually pretty funny.
The pre-hip hop Ricky.
Yeah, pre-hip hop Ricky. Yeah, pre Brooklyn wannabe Ricky.
As someone whose all my neighbors are people that defected from Brooklyn, this resonates with me so much.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask more about Ricky, but I think that's pretty good. That's just Ricky's MO, is that he gets really good and he is so focused on getting better and just pushing himself.
Yeah.
He did a really great job with that back in the day.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I also want to add on, this is actually a very relevant piece of information as far as tying this into the Rack 1 doc that you guys put out.
Mm-hmm.
In so much how the earlier days of Rack 1 were very freestyle heavy, Rack 2 was kind of the same way. I mean, there wasn't as much room to freestyle because it was charge boot centric, which doesn't leave as much room for creativity. It is very kind of cookie cutter, like this is the movement you should be doing. But at the end of the day, a lot of the people who were running Rack 2 early on were kind of still doing their own stuff. I mean, especially, you had people like Sippy who were very much more into the side of coming up with creative strats and trying to implement those into the run rather than focusing on movement tech. And you kind of had similar stuff. I mean, Insomniac was a bit of both. I mean, he's always been, as prolific with his strat hunting as he is good with his movement. So, it kind of made sense that he was the world record holder for a while because he was the kind of person who would grind out good movement and do some crazy stuff alongside of just having the good movement in the first place. So very much, you see the meta starting to shift toward cold precision, very much in the vein of Ouya. And right. I think that's probably the biggest turn and the biggest reason why Ricky dominated so hard when he was running the game. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also reminiscent of the first game, where Ricky was just like, "We got it. It's faster no matter what." I think is a quote from you. That's Ricky's mentality, is that we have to do the fastest thing, no matter what.
Yep.
So, and then that's how you get to a place where we just saved, what is that, 7? No.
I think by the time by the time his reign ends, the world record is dropped about 6 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you come in.
And then I come in.
5 or 6 months later, but you show up.
Yes.
Tell me about how you expanded your mind, went to other categories, other games.
Yeah. So until 2016, so from 2014 to 2016, I was known as the Ouya guy, right? Which started with me taking the game seriously. So essentially, what happened was I'll kind of give you a bit more information than you probably need, and then you can kind of just do with it what you will. But I got into serious Twitch streaming back in October 2014 because I had just graduated college. I was working I was working a crappy dead end job at a record store. And I kind of didn't really have much of a sense of direction in my life. And so I kind of defaulted back to the one thing that I always loved more than anything, which was video games. Because, I got a degree in opera singing, and I'm still an opera singer to this day. But back then, I was young. I was only, 21, 22. And you're not getting hired for stuff at 21 or 22. You're considered, you're not even considered a baby yet. You're considered like a zygote in the opera world. So I was working these crappy dead end jobs, and I did get back into streaming. And so I stuck with Ouya because that's the game I always loved as a kid. And I ran that for about a year and a half continuously, which people kind of told me I was a little insane for doing that. I think for roughly 15 months, I ran the same category. I ran Ouya NG+. Which culminated in my Games Done Quick run at HDQ 2016, which was the beginning of the modern era of rat games at GDQs. There
you go.
Which I'm very, very honored to be able to say that I kind of helped lead the charge there. So I want to say around that time, around the spring 2016, I was kind of cleaning up the other categories I had never run in Ouya. And then at that point I had a sweep in Ouya. And so I said, you know what, Ricky makes Rack 2 look really fun. And he also tells me that it's very similar to Ouya. So I think I want to give it a shot. I think I want to try my hand at playing Ouya now, or at Rack 2 now. And so I kind of, I didn't love it as much as Ouya initially, but I saw enough similarities that I said to myself, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. And fun did I have for a very long time running these categories. If I recall correctly, similar to how Ricky kind of came in and bodied everyone with his knowledge of Ouya movement. I may have had my dates a little bit crossed up. I think I did. I cleaned up pretty quickly, I think, actually, now that I think about it in Ouya, because I'm seeing my first runs being in February for Rack 2, February 2016. So,
yes.
So, I think that was basically after my GDQ run, I tried to clean up my times in all the different categories, try to get a world record and everything. And then when I got the sweep, I went over to Rack 2. So essentially, I'm actually very proud of myself for this, and this is the only time I'm gonna toot my own horn while talking about my legacy in this game. But I remember, similar to how Ricky came in and kind of bodied everyone with his knowledge of Ouya movement, I came in and bodied Ricky because I had better Ouya movement. That was still kind of the meta back then, which was if you're good at Ouya, Rack 2 is just the easier Ouya. And that's what it was known as for a very long time. Nowadays, I think there's plenty of differences between the two games, and just because you're good at one does not necessarily guarantee you'll be good at the other. But for a very, very long time, that was the case, where if you wanted to be good at Rack 2, everyone's recommendation was, well, just get good at Ouya, and then all of your skills will go back to Rack 2 and you'll be much better at the game. So that's why you kind of see me come in very shortly after my GDQ run. I think it took me roughly a week, maybe a little bit longer, before I had already beaten Ricky's time. So I was very proud of myself for that, because people were kind of touting Ricky as like the god of Rack 2, and I kind of came in and I was like, actually, you gotta kind of step aside.
That's right.
Real.
The champ is here.
The champ is here. No, but I mean, it really was kind of how crazy how that movement carried over so seamlessly, Yeah. And so you kind of see me just whittle stuff down very, very quickly. I think I kind of got, I remember pushing my time down to a 28, and then I was like, I'm not really super invested in this game right now. I'm going to go do some other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't until, I believe, October of 2016 that I finally was like, okay, I guess I should get a 27 or something like that. Because people have been talking about how out of date the world record was for so long at that point.
Yeah, for a while. Was this part of the bot project? Although you already had the world record, so.
Yeah, this was not a part of the bot project. The bot project. One of my most grandiose endeavors of self-indulgence. No, but yeah, this was not a part of the bot project. I just really liked I liked the idea of having world records back then, and so I didn't really value optimization and competition as much as I do now. But back then, all I cared about was just having my name as the world record holder. I thought it would be really, really cool if I was the kind of guy who had a world record in all these different categories.
Be the guy.
Yeah, I would become the guy, And so yeah, I ran Rack 2 for a little bit, and then the record kind of stood pat for a long time. I think I'm trying to think what pushed Rack 2 forward at that point. I want to say it was AGDQ 2017, where Skits and I got in with a Rack 2 race. So at that point, things kind of kicked back off again, and people started grinding a lot more. And I don't know if you have any other questions you want to ask before 2017 rolls around. I know I've kind of been spieling on and on about this for a little bit, so I want to give you a chance to interject.
Yeah, I get you. Let's see here. I don't think I have too many questions. I'm kind of just along for the ride at this point. Like I'm just Tell me more.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think what happened was I got 28 in No IMG in February of 2016, and then at that point, I believe I turned my efforts to NG Plus proper, which I just want to check the timetable real quick. I know I very quickly bopped Ricky in both categories. So yeah, I'm looking at it. So. Yeah, okay. I remember exactly what happened. So I decided to start with NG Plus because I figured if I could get world record in NG Plus in Rack 2, I could very easily translate that into No IMG, because the two are basically the same. Like NG Plus is just the last third of No IMG.
Right.
So I got world record in NG Plus. I remember back in the day, there were a few different people who were all kind of fighting for that, and Ricky kind of ended up on top. And I went in and I got like a 10-20, and then I went to No IMG, got the 28. And then I think I went back to Ouya after that. I was like, yeah, you know what? It was fun running Rack 2 for a couple weeks. I'm going to go back to the game I actually enjoy. And I did that, and then inevitably went back to Rack 2 because I believe a lot of us in the community were talking about submitting a 4-person Rack 2 No IMG race. Now, this is I'm going to give you some deep lore. A lot of people don't even know about this.
Okay.
But
an exclusive.
So, yeah, this is breaking news. So the 4 people who were discussing this, I believe it was me, Skits, SR, the both of us who inevitably were the ones who got in. I believe it was Zorblox and Skrit. So the 4 of us were talking about submitting, and we were all thick as thieves back then.
Mm-hmm.
Now, eventually, there would be a bit of a falling out with Zorblox over, let's just call it political differences. I think that's probably the easiest way to put it.
Okay.
But essentially, what ended up happening was the 4 of us were talking about this, and we knew Zorp was a good Rack 2 runner back then because he had world record in any percent at one point. He had world record in NG Plus once or twice. So we knew he could run the games, but he had never actually done a full run of No IMG. However, we still wanted to submit a 4-person race. So what happened was, I removed one of my PBs from YouTube, and I gave it to him. I gave the footage to him, and just told him to submit that as his own run. And so nobody knew it for a very long time, but that was actually my run. I forget if he still has it up or not, but he had like a 28, like a high 28 or a low 29 or something like that. And or maybe even a high 29. I know it was a sub 30 run. I can remember that much.
Right.
But I essentially just gave him the run, and he restreamed it on his Twitch and just pretended that he was doing it the whole time. And we were all just like patting ourselves on the back. We were like, "Oh, job well done, guys. Oh, we really pulled this off." But what ended up happening was, now this is where it gets kind of funny. I was notorious for having a file in Rack 2 that was missing 1 nanotech. Exactly 1 nanotech. There's like 40 health, I believe you can pick up, 40 pieces of nanotech. And I always had 39. And I always knew where the last nanotech container was. And everyone would always say, "Zem, why don't you get the last nanotech?" And I would always tell them, "I don't get it because of you, all of you guys who keep asking me to get it. I'm doing it to piss all of you off."
Yeah, exactly.
And so the problem was, that run that I gave to Zorplox still had the missing nanotech. And so if he didn't, make it sneaky, everyone would have known it was my run and that something fishy was going on, because he always ran on full nanotech. And so what he ended up doing was, I think it was like around the holidays or something like that. It was getting close to it. And so he put like a bunch of shitty like Rack snowman gifts, like Ratchet, like wearing the snowman skin.
Right.
Like over top his nanotech bar, and it like over top the entire thing, so no one could tell that there was a missing nanotech.
That's really funny.
Yeah. And so we submitted this, and it turns out that it was a wasted effort anyway, because they only took me and Skits. And here's another funny piece of information for you. What was so hilarious was people were actually kind of annoyed that it was Skits. I remember very specifically that Ricky knew that Zorp had a longer history running the game, and he saw Zorp's sub 30 run that was actually my run, but he didn't know. Yeah, and he legitimately, I shit you not, he sat down Skits one time in like either a voice call or in DMs or something like that, and tried to convince him to give his spot to Zorplox because he thought that Zorplox would do a better job. And then we had to sit down Ricky and be like, "Actually, that was my run."
Oh my gosh.
At that point, he was like, "Damn, I feel like a douchebag now."
Yeah.
But that was actually that's a really funny, like, deep piece of lore for you there.
That is very, very deep. That's a good story.
Yeah. So essentially that's what revitalized Rack 2 No IMG was the AGDQ 2017 run, where both me and Skits wanted to be at our best. And I remember I actually, I only bring this up because this ends up being relevant later, but Skits and I had a gentleman's agreement that we would not practice until the week of GDQ.
Okay.
Like we wanted to keep it as entertaining as possible, so we didn't want to like be like super sweaty tryhards about it.
Yeah.
And we that's where we coined the term dirty practice. So anytime we saw anybody like practicing Rack 2 at any point, like whether it was before runs or whatever, we would always tell them, "I see you're getting in your dirty practice, like all your dirty reps." But that was kind of like that was kind of my MO early on in my time of running Rack 2, is that I was very adamant about kind of BMing the Rack 2 community, because I came in as the hotshot Ouya runner who kind of just shat on everybody.
Yeah.
I was in many ways I was very, very full of myself back then, and I do kind of feel bad about it and how it all transpired and the arguments that it led to, but in some cases it does make for a very good story. But I remember I was very vocal about never practicing Rack 2 stuff. Like I would practice Ouya for hours and hours whenever I would run Ouya, but I would always talk about how Yeah, like, oh, I don't practice Rack 2. Practicing Rack 2 is for losers. Like, I just shit on everybody anyway. I don't need to practice. And so we kind of embodied this mentality going into GDQ. And so Skits and I really only did, like, we would do like a few races every night to kind of de-rust and kind of get back in the mojo. And I remember these races being extremely lopsided. Like, I think if I recall correctly, it was somewhere in the ballpark of like, I had won like 10 or 12 out of the 11 or 13 that we did. Like, I remember it was like we did like, I want to say like low double digit number of runs, and I won all but one of them. And it was kind of the same story every time, where in all of these runs, Skits would get an early lead, and then he would kind of mess up the late game stuff pretty hard, and I would run like a pretty miraculous comeback. And the reason there's a reason why I'm bringing up all of this, but essentially the GDQ race itself, I remember I was actually I remember being very, very upset on Skits' behalf, because I gained a very early lead on Skits in the GDQ race. And at that point, I knew I just had the entire thing locked up, because like, I was like, Skits, I knew Skits needed his early edge to be able to win the race. And when he didn't get it, I was like, oh, this is kind of over.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying any of this to BM. In fact, I'm saying this actually to set up the story of what's to come. Because Skits was very down in the dumps about losing this race, especially the way that he did. And so what ended up happening was, that was kind of his last time in the States for a while, because he was going to do I forget exactly what it was, but it was like a 6-month teaching program in Japan, where he went to Japan to teach English to people who were learning English as a second language.
Yep.
And so he was there and was kind of he kind of socially isolated, aside from just the people that he was hanging out with at the program. But it was hard for him to kind of, keep up with all of us in the speedrunning community, and we were, some of his closest friends, and so he kind of took that time to look a little bit inwards, and he kind of said, I don't really want to go out, have my Rack 2 legacy just be me coming close and then losing. I kind of want to prove that I still have it in me to compete with the big boys. And so we lovingly refer to this as the Japan grind. and Skits grinded for a very, very long time. I want to say like maybe a month, like a couple months. I forget, to be honest with you, because right. I know that Skits, his problem, he's always been very technically proficient at the games, but his problem was always mental. He very quickly gets into his own head, and oftentimes, I mean, I always say that speedrunning is at least 50% mental.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that largely, especially nowadays with how many resources all the runners in the Rack community have, everyone largely kind of has the same proficiency when it comes to movement tech. But a lot of it is just, do you have the grit to just sit there and grind for hours and hours and choose to not get upset when things don't go your way?
Right.
And so for Skits, that was a big problem. He kind of didn't really have the patience to sit there and grind, but he said, I'm going to fucking do this. I'm going to prove that I can be the best, and prove it. He did. He eventually, as I'm looking at the timeline here, in March of 2017, he finally closed out world record in a pretty grand fashion as well. It wasn't just a small improvement. He crushed it. He crushed
20
it.
20 seconds.
20 whole seconds. And this would end up being a pretty pivotal PB, because this would kind of be the end of an era of people not taking Rack 2 super seriously. Moving forward, all the people who end up getting world record, myself included, had to make actual serious efforts to sit down and learn the new movement tech, practice hard, learn proxies, which are starting to become more and more relevant as we move forward. But this was a very pivotal world record, and one that stood for, as I'm seeing it here, 5 months, so almost a half year, until it was finally bopped by Yoshi Pro, or YP. So again, I will take a brief pause first off to drink some water. And
there you go.
If you have anything you'd like to ask or add now at this point, feel free to do so.
Yeah. One of the runs that I did watch leading up to this in my research was your 2746. And I don't know, it's that video is interesting because you're watching a run on stream and you have somebody with you. So it's like you're watching like an offline VOD or something. So I'm not sure what the thing is with that, but you did talk about the GDQ only took 2 instead of 4. And so I did kind of know that going in. So I thought that was
Oh, and also I need to point this out for the again for deep lore purposes, but the reason you'll notice I'm the only one who runs with snowman skin.
Yes, because you can't look at the feet, and that's the important part of movement.
Yes, yeah. I intentionally try to make it as hard as I could for myself, so I could swag on people even harder when I got world records.
Yes, you specifically said that in that 27.
Yeah, I was a little, I'm not going to say I was sniffing my own farts, but it wasn't that far off.
Yeah, you're definitely full of it. But hey, listen.
Yeah.
I said it. That makes you the foil, and that makes you a very fun villain.
Yeah. I would like to think that I've leveled out a lot since then, but yeah. Oh, as I'm seeing it now, I have my 27 pulled up. That's my friend Brad in the background. Yeah. He's a friend that a very good friend of mine from back when I lived in Pittsburgh. But yeah, that's kind of irrelevant to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that's all good. All right.
How does it feel to be speedrunning's biggest heel?
Well, it's actually funny. I mean, I think a lot of speedrunners are drawn to Super Smash Bros. Melee for many reasons. A lot of it being that both speedrunning and Melee are very technical in what you are expected to accomplish and require very precise inputs.
Right.
And I don't know how well versed you guys are in Melee, but probably
CJ not so much.
Okay, so then you'll know that probably the most controversial figure by far is Hungrybox.
Yes.
Hungrybox has always been known as the heel of the Smash community, and for a very, very long time, people refer to me as the HBox of the Ratchet community, where it's like, I was the guy that I would say there's a lot of overlap. I was always the guy who was popular with people who were not involved with the community, similar to how HBox is very popular with people who are not big into Smash right now. Like he draws like the ultimate crowd, like the very casual, has not been playing Smash for 20 years kind of crowd.
Right.
And similarly, the people within the Smash community proper did not like HBox at all. A lot of people in the Ratchet community did not like me at all. And like I said, I was very contentious. I got into tons of drama and arguments with people over the years. And a lot of it, I believe, was justified because I did act like quite a bit of a prick. But nowadays, I mostly just kind of keep to myself. And I think that most of the drama that ever surrounds me these days is just a lot of feelings that people still have of me from back then that I have. In my defense, I've tried to make amends with as many people as possible, but sometimes you can't always change. You can't change the past at all, and you can't always change people's minds.
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
I try to do my best that I can for the community in as many ways as I can do it, but there will always be people who don't like you for one reason or another.
Yeah. Anybody throw a crab at you?
No crabs just yet. I'm still waiting on that. I think if I win the APB race, this GDQ coming up, then I know that it's an online event, but I'm still kind of expecting someone to just barrel through my room and just chuck some sort of crustacean at me.
Next time we have a GDQ in person, I'll throw a crab at you.
Yeah, please do. That'd be so funny.
Be lost on too many people, I'd get in trouble. Okay. All right. So how familiar are you with the rest of the history? Because I know you're involved at least into 2018, but beyond that, are you super involved in the rest of it, or?
My role past 2018 is very much kind of like a spiritual guide / coach. Beyond 2018, it really depends. I mean, it depends what period we're talking about here. So if we're talking about the era of 24 and beyond, I definitely take like more of a coach kind of role. But until then, it was mostly just kind of, that was. So it's probably easier for me to go into this just based on moving forward in linearly.
Yeah. So I guess to move into the next part, you said skits 27, 26 was like the end of the era, right? And that's when everyone moving forward had to take it seriously.
Kind of, yeah. I would say like, you could argue that's the end of the era. You could also argue that YP's 27 flat is the end of the era.
Okay.
But essentially, yeah, that you're starting to see a transition now where if you want to get world record in Rack 2, you have to actually practice. And this becomes more and more pertinent as we move forward through time. So starting with YP, if I recall correctly, YP still used old movement. I do not think he used proxies. I think he was the last person to ever not use proxies and have world record. But YP, I've known him for many years now, and he's such a goofy dude. I love YP. He's kind of an enigma in some ways. Like he's I think he was mostly known. I don't really know what he's known for, but I always knew him as the guy who loved Glover. He was for the longest time the glove god. And he always had a world record in Glover. He was always trying to get people to run Glover. And he was also the kind of dude who would very much just like run whatever the hell he felt like. Like I'm trying to pull up his speedrun.com profile right now, but if you do, there's just like a ton of just random games. Including at one point he was the world record holder in Celeste. So, and this was back when it was him and TGH. TGH, like before TGH kind of had a stranglehold over the game. Him and YP were trading world records back and forth. So I want to be very clear about this. YP is a beast of a speedrunner. He is a very, very good speedrunner, but I'm looking at his profile right now, and he has so many games on it. He has everything from Glover to Ratchet to Half-Life to Mega Man to Wallace and Gromit in Project Zoo. I remember him running Shrek 2 at one point, I think it was.
Yeah.
Like he's done everything from platformers to shooters to like meme licensed games and everything in between. So he's done a ton of stuff. He's a very, very prolific speedrunner. And eventually he turned his efforts towards Rack 2. And sorry, I'm getting distracted because I'm seeing right now that he has almost a complete sweep on the Psychonauts leaderboard, which I didn't even know was a thing that he had done. But apparently that's what he's been working on this year. But anyway, he decided to run Rack 2 because I think he just really liked the game as a kid and saw the speedrun and thought it was really interesting. And so, of course, we tried to help him out as much as we could and helped him learn stuff. And he picked it up very quickly, as he does most of the games he runs. And I think within like a month or two of playing the game, he had beaten Skits' time by 5 seconds or something like that.
Right.
And he kind of wanted to be the first one to get the 26. And I think he grinded for a while once he got the 27 flat. And I think he just kind of lost his desire to play the game. I think he just kind of didn't really enjoy it all that much.
Yeah, lost the fire.
Yeah. And at that point, I'm trying to remember what happened with Scottobozo, because this is kind of entering the new era. Scottobozo is the turn of the era for Rack 2 for sure.
Yeah. I give you a quick second to breathe.
Sure.
I remember looking through them, and I'm like, okay, Ricky's 32-42, Ricky's 29-34, Zem's 27-46. I'm seeing like improvements, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of looks like the same thing, but just done better, right? And then Scotto Bozo's was the first time where I was like, yo, we're doing new shit now.
Yeah.
Like, this is totally different, right?
Very, very much so, yeah. I'm trying to see how this all happened. I don't quite remember. But I know for a fact, give me a second here while I gather my bearings as I figure this out. But yeah, so okay. I remember what happened. He kind of got his start with no specials, if I recall correctly. And at the time, there was another category that was very similar to no IMG called no specials, where the only difference is you don't use the specials menu at all. In NG Plus, you use both first-person wall climb and the Insomniac Museum shortcut, which are both in the specials menu. In no IMG, you still use first-person wall climb, but you don't use the shortcut. And in no specials, you don't use either. And that's literally the only difference.
Got it.
And at the time, we had it on the main leaderboard. Nowadays, if you dig a little bit, you'll find it on the category extensions leaderboard, where it belongs. It's always belonged there, but back at the time, that leaderboard didn't exist. So no specials was kind of just like the weirder version of the weirder and slower version of no IMG. Because it was almost exactly the same category, just a minute slower because you didn't use first person.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening was Scott Bozo mostly stuck to running no specials for a very long time. That's where he got good, is running no specials. And that's kind of where he incorporated a lot of the proxy movement. So proxies, I know a lot of people already know what proxies are, but for the people who would be watching this who have no idea what a proxy is, a proxy, it was a term, I don't know if it was coined in Spyro, but I know personally I learned about it through Spyro speedrunning, which is
it's connected to Spyro in some way. I don't know exactly, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the idea is that a proxy is the translation of horizontal momentum to vertical momentum, and that's the basic idea. Now, there are different kinds of proxies you can pull off in different spots, especially in Spyro. But essentially the way it works is that in Rack 2, it's very easy to do proxies because what you do is you pull out the decoy glove and you charge forward at a sloped wall. It has to be sloped. I think less than 85 degrees. And so what happens is you charge against a wall that you would normally bonk into. And when Ratchet is right about to bonk, you toss a decoy, and it just launches you straight into the air. And I'm sure you'll have visual examples of that, so people can see what you mean, or what we mean when we talk about proxies. But essentially, that kind of changed everything, because the reason why it was so impactful was because we never had any sort of way to climb slopes without using first person.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially what that did was it just made no specials even faster. And if I recall correctly, at one point, there were a couple of instances where both Scott Bozo and myself, I believe, got world record in no specials that was so fast, it constituted also being record in no IMG.
Wow.
And normally it's a category that's supposed to be a minute slower. So that's where whenever you see these big time jumps, that's usually where you're seeing it from, is that like big advancements will be made and we would get these times in no specials and then be like, well, I guess if we're doing this in no specials, we should do it in the faster version of an NG Plus as well. And so what ended up happening was Scotto learned all these proxies, and a lot of people kind of viewed it as a waste of time. They didn't really understand how fast it would inevitably become. And Scotto kind of came in after he got his movement tech polished, and with all these new proxies, and just kind of demolished all the older runs. I mean, it wasn't even close. If I recall correctly, he got no IMG world record. So he grinded no specials until he got world record in that. And then he moved to no IMG. And if I recall correctly, he got world record in like 14 or 17 attempts, something like that. Like,
Whoa.
Like it took him literally like one afternoon to get world record in no IMG because he'd already done like the slower version and learned all the movement tech there.
Mm-hmm.
So he just got a crappy run in no IMG by his standards, but it was good enough to just body everybody else. So I forget exactly which run that was that did that. I know at some point there's even like a cheeky comment that he has in one of his comments that's like, I think it was like 14 attempts is too many. I think it was his first no IMG world record that he ever got, 27:08, which I don't believe is on the stat page.
Yeah, I have that somewhere. I don't know how I found it, but 27:08 is one of the runs that I saw as a world record.
Yeah, so that did end up bopping Yoshi Pro. And yeah, I'm looking at the description right now. It says very hard world record, 14 attempts is too many. Which was very funny. But yeah, I remember I was definitely malding watching that run because I was like pissed that this person was just like clowning on everybody, and I think he was even wearing the clown skin because because of Scotto Bozo, so Bozo the clown.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was just straight clowning on everybody. I was malding as hell because like Scotto and I didn't really see eye to eye a whole lot back then, and we kind of got into a lot of heated arguments. There was a very long-standing rivalry. It was a rivalry, but it was not friendly. Like we were very much like in some ways, like we would go out of our way to make the other one feel bad.
Ooh.
Like I remember, I think I did at the time like a New Game Plus trifecta run.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, or I think it was trifecta any percent. I believe that's what it was. And I ended up beating the previous world record holder by a pretty substantial amount. It was Toe Hobbit, who is in many ways a very pivotal Rack 2 runner in his own right. But what ended up happening was, I think like after a lot of us kind of taking like subtle shots at each other, but not really like committing to it, I think like it was total war after Scotto made a comment about how like I basically only really got any percent trifecta because I ran Ratchet 1 on PS3 and Toe Hobbit ran on PS2, and PS3 is like significantly faster than PS2.
Right.
And I remember at that point the gloves were off for a very, very long time. We were not friends, and we caused a lot of tension in the community. And I believe it took us until, if I have my dates correct, May 23rd, 2018, for us to finally bury the hatchet.
Goodness.
But until then, all throughout 2017, we hated each other. We really, and through the first half of 2018.
Man.
And so eventually what ended up happening was Scotto learned proxies and demolished everybody. With his times, I think he ended up getting a 26:48 before he took a break from the category. And that's what ended up happening was he wanted to improve that, but I came back to the category because I wanted to basically tell Scott to stuff it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my MO through a lot of my earlier years in the Rack community, was kind of doing things to spite people, running categories to keep world records away from people, and in many ways, it did create a lot of hungry competition, but in many more ways, I'm very happy that nowadays I try to take on a role that's much friendlier and much more encouraging towards other runners. But what ended up happening was I came back to that category, and I made it my goal to just shit on Scott as hard as I could, which is also kind of funny because we share the same first name. And so it was like the war of the Scots.
Yeah.
So essentially what happened was I think I beat his world record by 1 second. I think I got a 26:47. And at that point I kind of ran away with it, and Scott started running other stuff. I kind of forget what he ran, but that would start a very long, like anxiety-filled period where we never really ran the same stuff because it got like way too heated, way too fast. But again, now I just want to be very clear that nowadays we are quite friendly with each other, and I try my best to, I'm not trying to say I'm trying to make amends for the past, because I feel like that comes with the territory of like not being genuine. In many ways, I'm trying to just move forward, and I'm trying to be a much more encouraging person. And in many ways, I try to be one of his biggest fans nowadays, and I root him on as often as I can. Especially, he also is one of the best classic Tetris players in the world, which is a kind of a fun Scotto fact. He competed in the Classic Tetris World Championship, and he's competed the past couple of years. And he actually, I think he was seeded in like the 40s, and he ended up eliminating the 5th seeded player.
Wow.
Which is, I believe, thus far the second largest upset of the entire tournament.
God damn.
The tournament is still going on, but like I was in chat, I was just like, I was hooting and hollering in that chat. I'm sure people got so annoyed with me, because I was like the one person, anytime Scott did anything, I was like, yeah, let's go, Scott. But yeah, I just want to be very clear that that's eventually where it gets to, but it takes a while to get there.
I got you.
I think at that point, I kind of took proxies and kind of did what I'm known for doing in the Ratchet community, which is taking the creativity of the other members of the community and trying to tweak it and make it as fast as possible. And that's kind of what you see me do here, because I believe I lower the world record by nearly a minute and a half.
Yep.
Over the course of the next like month. So yeah, I think I'm looking at the timeline right now. I got world record back December 9th. And then on January 1st, the first day of 2018, I got 25:29. Yep. So in less than a month's time, I lowered world record by, what is it, like
a minute?
Yeah, a little over a minute 15. So yeah, the proxy technology, I basically just kind of yoinked it, and I was like, thanks for doing all the hard work, nerds. All right, it's time for the Chad to come in here and flex a little bit. But that would really be, I believe, my last major stint running the category. And still to this day, I didn't even realize how long it's been since I've ran the category. I've run plenty of other Rack 2 stuff. And I've been implying, I primarily stick to all platinum bolts these days, as well as maybe 100% from time to time. But yeah, that would be my last stint for a very, very long time in running the category. And at that point, I believe that record stood for about 8 months, and then Scott got back, very poetically beating my time by 1 second.
Yep, I also see that as well.
Yes, and so this is kind of I want to say like the like throughout the initial era of Scott taking world record, like this like 2 month span where Scott takes record and then I lower it by a bunch. That's like where all the stuff is starting to metastasize a little bit, like it's all codifying and coming together. But the full era, the full turn into the new era would not really pick up until Scott takes world record back. And now this is like the era of advancement, I'll call it, where it's just, little bits of time save everywhere now. That's what people are hunting for. The game is getting more and more optimized, and now it's all about smart reroutes, looking at new strategies that we've never really explored much before. You've got a whole lot more strat hunters coming to the community, finding stuff that people never really thought about all that much. So a lot more creative minds, a lot of determined runners coming in. And now really the only two names that are super duper important as far as keeping track of world records go from here on in are Scott Bozo and Fear SR.
Yep.
Now, Fear, so basically at this point, with me kind of stepping away from Rack 2 no IMG, there's kind of this power vacuum now where Scott is kind of there at the top, but nobody's really contesting him. And along comes this runner from Australia named Fear, who he's not really like picking the game up super quickly, but he's determined and he really loves the game and he really like wants to prove himself. And this is where I say that I kind of take on more of a spiritual mentor role at this point, because now that Scott and I have buried our hatchets and we're actually friends now, and Fear is coming through, I'm noticing that there is, like, both of these guys, pretty much their biggest issues is kind of just like, again, keeping up with the grind. Like they're both becoming more and more technically proficient as the days roll by. But I'm starting to notice that, like, you know, in crucial moments, they'll like choke runs in certain spots, or like Fear will get particularly down on himself. And so I kind of try to make it my goal to help these guys, you know, solidify their mentality a little bit more. Mostly with Fear. I remember with Fear, and also with another runner named Torpedo, my goal was to kind of help them like steady their emotions and kind of do what I could to see them turn to the runners that I kind of see that they could be.
Right.
And with Scott Abozo kind of just like wiping the floor with everyone right now, I remember what happened was he lowered world record to like mid 24. Okay. And he knew the record could go lower. He absolutely did. But he was, you know, at this point, we're kind of turning over a new leaf in the community. We're trying to be much more inclusive, and we're trying to be much more like rooting people on rather than tearing each other down. I think all this time of drama and cutthroat competition really took its toll on us. And so we very much are trying to encourage people to be at their best. And so I know for a fact that Scott knew he could improve his time, but he wanted to step away from the game for a while and remove himself from the equation so that Fear could also now in turn grow into the speedrunner that Scott and I both knew that he could be. And so essentially Scott steps away. He's like, I'm not coming back to the game until Fear beats my time. And so that's why you see it like Scott's last run is November 2018. He got a 24:22. The next world record would be in June of 2019. Yeah. And so now you have Fear, who has been working very, very hard this whole time, but like, you know, he's young. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people don't consider, is that like a lot of people in the speedrunning community are super young, you know, and I think Fear at the time was like 17, 18. Gosh. And so it makes sense that, you know, he gets to a really nerve-wracking part and he chokes because he's not mentally equipped to deal with that much pressure. Like the pressure. I always talk about this, and I kind of lovingly refer to this concept as the right to win, where I think one of the biggest things that ends up separating people who have not yet ever gotten world record and people who have had established themselves as world record holders is the right to win, the right where you believe that you are allowed to earn world record. So like, I think a lot of people when they've never gotten world record before, they get on a world record paced run and they think to themselves, oh my God, I'm about to get world record. I'm about to get like that one thing I've always wanted. And instead of focusing on what they focus on what they could achieve as opposed to what's right in front of them. And what happens 99% of the time when you start to think, oh my God, I'm going to get world record, is you choke and you lose world record.
Yep.
And this is such a common, it's not even a phenomenon at all. It's a common thing that happens in speedrunning where people, they don't take it one step at a time. They look too far ahead and they make one little mistake they weren't prepared for because they weren't thinking about it. And they start to freak out and they lose all their time. And that would happen to Fear constantly. And I'm not saying this to shit on him at all. Right. I'm trying to paint the picture of how far he's come, really, because he was a perpetual choke artist for months. He would always get so close and then like lose 15 or 20 seconds and then not be able to roll with the punches very well, and then just totally lose his entire run and then beat himself up and then turn off stream. And I would always talk to Fear about this. I'd be like, Fear, you have to forgive yourself when you make mistakes. Like you have to be willing to like, tuck and roll a little bit. You gotta like, you're even in just like doing no resets or allowing yourself to just finish crappy runs of any kind, or just hunting for gold splits on dead runs. You're going to prepare yourself mentally so much more for what's to come. And, eventually, like a lot of this stuff started really sticking with him. He finally started to like really get his bearings and figure out what it took to remain clutch in the moment. And I remember just how absolutely overjoyed he was when he finally got his first world record. And it really was like a climbing Everest of sorts for him, like a conquering on such a grandiose level. Because he was starting to like believe that he was never going to be able to beat Scott. Like he really truly was so in his own head that he thought that he was always going to find a way to choke in crucial moments. And I think this was just such a huge relief for him. And it's you kind of see at this point now, the next challenge was going to be the race to 23. So 23 and has been and obviously still is right now the huge milestone, because we have not yet seen a 22, even though I believe the strats exist to make it happen. Okay. But and I'll get into that in a little bit in a moment here. But the big barrier was 23, and once Fear finally got world record back, Scott cracked his knuckles. He was like, "Okay, I'm gonna come back now. This is gonna be fun." And him and Fear basically had a direct, it was a very amicable rivalry. It was night and day from the rivalry that Scott and I had, in the years prior. It was very much like they would root each other on and try to, see each other be at their best. But it was also very much a race to get to 23. Both of them wanted to win.
Right.
And at this point, I believe that, Scott had become much more clutch of a speedrunner. He had kept growing all this time as a speedrunner and still very much is a very, very prolific speedrunner. And, everybody keeps getting better and better every single year. Scott was no exception. He comes in, he's much more mentally fortified, much more ready to tackle this challenge. Especially without all these bad feelings being in the air. I think that was probably also taking a big toll on really both of us. Yeah. Even though I kind of thrived off the negative energy back in the day. I don't. Again, we had younger people in the community. Scott was like, fucking 18 at the time. He's, when you have somebody who like wants you to lose so badly, you're not going to perform at your best. It's going to be mentally like anxiety inducing. Mm-hmm. So now Scott's much more in it. He's much more mentally steadied and he's ready to tackle this. And I think if I recall correctly, he ends up winning the race to 23. And he gets world record back a little less than 1 month after Fear got world record. Yep. And it would take Fear's the mental slopes that he had scaled he kind of got a bit of a vibe check. It was very much like, all right, this is what it's going to be like if you want to compete at the high levels. You got to compete with the big boys. Yeah. And so Fear had to essentially go through a whole new round, a new rotation of learning how to be clutch and learning how to be the best he could be. And a lot of this came from him becoming kind of the pioneer of the newest meta of Rack 2 movement, which is Midair Charges. And so if you don't know, in Ratchet and Clank 2 and 3, mm-hmm. You double tap R1 and you rocket forward with the charge boots, right? Right. And if you're in midair, you can't use the charge boots, except you can hit a 1 frame window to refresh your charge in midair. Now, keep in mind, these games are at 60 frames per second.
Oh, boy.
But it turns out in Rack 2, there's a relatively consistent method to do it. It's very difficult to pull off, but it is consistent if you do it properly.
Okay.
In Ouya, I've talked to Fear about this, and if I recall correctly, Fear has said that in Ouya it's not the same level of consistency, because there is like sometimes like a frame or two of lag in Ouya when you input certain stuff.
Okay.
So it's not as consistent as Ouya, so we do different methods in Ouya, but in Rack 2, Fear has essentially mastered this movement. I mean, he doesn't hit it consistently either. I mean, it's impossible to hit 100% of the time. But he's the only one who really pushed this stuff forward with these midair charges. He was doing constant reroutes, constantly timing everything, double checking all of the work that had been done over years and years, being like, is this really faster or do we just think it's faster? And he kind of pushed forward a lot of the routing differences that you see now, a lot of the little stuff here and there. There's some other runners too who have made big strides forward, like Mantodia, Izaki, Scottobozo as well has done a lot of glitch hunting for Rack 2. Torpedo's done a lot of testing of different kinds of stuff. But you see mostly Fear rebranding himself as a totally different speedrunner now. He's very much more mentally steady. He has the best technique now of any Ratchet runner, or of any Ratchet 2 runner. And to this day, I mean, I still believe he easily has the best movement, at least as far as NG plus categories are concerned. Yeah, he really did the work. He didn't cut any corners, and he sat down and he grinded as often as he could, and he would make very concerted efforts to not beat himself up as much, and it culminated in him lowering the barrier more and more of what we considered possible. And now I believe he took Scotto's 2355 and he's lowered it all the way down to 2331 now.
Yep.
And that's where the record currently stands. Now, I believe Fear has gone back to no IMG and he's trying to lower that even further. He wants to get 22 really, really desperately. And certainly the time save is there, like I've said before. Especially he's proved that this past year, where he could save, I think, if I recall correctly, it's some absurd amount of time just in the NG Plus section, because he broke the 8-minute barrier and he got the first ever sub 8 in Rack 2 NG Plus, which is a huge milestone. I think he's like 40 seconds faster than second place or something like that. Yeah, it's something insane like that. But I mean, even if you don't consider the vast amount of people who are behind him, I believe he got his 2331 back when he had like an 8.2x or something crazy like that, an 8.1x in NG Plus. So there's been so much more optimization, even just in the NG Plus portion of the game.
Right.
Except now the game is so much harder, and Fear is in university, and so he doesn't have as much free time. And frankly, I support that. I didn't even start speedrunning until I was 22, like seriously.
Yeah.
And I am very much like, you know, even though I look back on it, I'm like, oh wow, I could have been so much better. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I think I'm a product of all the experiences I ever had in college that I allowed myself to have. If I had been a Twitch streamer, if I had been focusing on grinding games all throughout college, I would have missed out on so much of my formative experiences. And so, you know, that's something that I'm really happy to see in a lot of these younger people, is that as they go through college, and especially as you know, with the coronavirus effectively shutting down human contact as much as it has, I think people are starting to realize that speedrunning is supposed to take a back seat to real life.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm lucky because I can kind of sit down, like speedrunning is my full-time job right now, and I'm lucky to be a full-time streamer. But at the same time, you know, even I know when to balance speedrunning and when to balance doing other stuff. You know, you can't force yourself. Sports have off seasons for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems inherently with speedrunning, is that there is no such thing as an off season. you know, if you slack or fall behind, there's always going to be somebody who's hungry and wants to take your record from you. And I think burnout is something that happens very, very easily in the speedrunning community for that exact reason. And I think what happens is, because a lot of speedrunners don't, and this isn't a knock to the people who speedrun, but this is more so just like a lot of speedrunners are younger people, and they don't have as they don't have that same established sense of self-worth that maybe older people do. But I know nowadays, now that I'm 28 years old, I know that my worth is not tied to how many world records I have or how fast my times are. I love the competition. I will always love pushing myself to be the best I possibly can be. But I think what happens is a lot of people, this is the first thing they've ever really truly been great at, and they attach so much of themselves to it.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment of like, yeah, I see that a lot too.
And so even though I know Fear wants to push this to 22, and I think that is his primary goal right now, I am very, very proud of him that he is focusing on real life as well as speedrunning. You know, he's not obsessing over grinding hours upon hours every day. He's trying to make the most out of his time being a student. I know he also is a very athletic person. We've had many, many conversations because I'm a huge tennis fan and he plays tennis. So that's something that we can talk about. You know, we talk about sports. I know that when coronavirus, you know, I know that the tennis is a big part of his life. I don't know what it's like now with the coronavirus, but you know, I know that he's a very active person, and that's something that he really values. And when he's ready to get 22, I have full confidence that he'll be able to do it. And you know, and I'm currently burnt out on NG plus categories right now because I've been grinding so much Ouya. But I am really hoping that when Fear is able to dedicate himself to the 22 grind, that I'm in a place where I can join him, because I think that would be a really, really fun. And I actually hope that not just myself, but I hope that Scott Bozo comes back. I hope that Torpedo keeps grinding. He keeps pushing himself as well, because he's always been like the Torpedo's had a history of always being the bridesmaid, never being the bride. I think right now he's second place in the category, and he really, really wants to. Or I don't even know if he's second place. I think he might still be third, if I recall correctly.
He's in third.
So he's been hungry this entire time. He's never stopped grinding it. But Torpedo is he is a very slow and steady kind of person. He doesn't find it disheartening. Well, sometimes everybody finds it disheartening when you don't PB. But I think he knows the kind of pace he wants to go at. But
yeah,
what I'm really hoping is the future of Rack 2 No IMG is this future where, you know, you have myself, Scotto, Fear, Torpedo, even people like Sneepy, you know, anybody else who wants to throw their hat in the ring and be a top contender in the category. We're all just kind of coming together and rooting each other on and pushing this category to its absolute limits. So even though 22 is the barrier on the horizon, and I'm sure if you talk to Fear, he'll talk a lot about the 22 barrier himself.
Right.
I really am hoping that a lot of this category is all of us, you know, the top six. I'm looking at the top 6 runners, top 7 runners right now. You know, all of us, any single one of us could join in on this grind and all help push each other. You know, Mantodia, Lox, Armin are no exceptions. I really do hope to see all of us going for this and rooting each other on and helping each other improve. So I think, as far as my perspective of Rack 2 is concerned, and this is very much, you know, a storyline that I myself kind of forced on people.
Right.
I think it's Rack 2 thankfully has gone from a category that was full of drama and showboating and rivalry to a category where we will all work together and root each other on and prove how much stronger this community has become over the past couple of years. So that's kind of the story that I'm hoping for. We'll see. We'll obviously see what happens in the future. I mean, there's people always want to run categories, but life has a very funny way of getting in the way of life.
That's right.
So yeah.
Alrighty. You've changed, Zim. You used to be a showboat. You used to hate on the haters. Now you're talking about, we're all going to come together and all going to be cool.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing as well. I really do hope to see a massive influx of people when Rift Apart comes out. That is the hot biz. I mean, everyone and their mom. I mean, this I'm doing this recording as of November 16th, 2020, when I've been refreshing 5 or 6 different websites every hour trying to get a PS5. And I can't do it. It's impossible. But we've heard the rumors that Rift Apart is slated to come out in early 2021. So we think that means somewhere around March or April. Mm-hmm. We'll obviously see what happens, but by that time, hopefully many people all around the world have gotten their PS5s. And we're hoping that the idea of a new Ratchet game that is completely different from all the ones before it will bring in a new wave of people who are so excited to share their love for these games the way that we all have over these past many, many years. And hopefully that will also transition into more people, looking at the other Ratchet games, looking at Ratchet 2 and beyond, mm-hmm. and trying their luck at it and seeing what kind of stories they can create for themselves. So yeah. I'm very proud of how far this community has come. I really, really am. And I think a lot of it was in spite of me, and a lot of it was because of me. And for both things, I wouldn't change anything, because I feel like, at least as far as my place is concerned in this community, I've grown so much from all the people that I've been lucky enough to meet and work with.
Perfect. Alrighty. Let me go ahead. I think we can end the recording here, don't you think?
I think so, unless you have any other questions or comments that you need out of me.
I don't know. Let's see. No, I think you covered everything. That's like as much as I can say. Sorry about CJ. He's like, I gotta go to bed. I'm so tired.
Yeah, no worries.
But he didn't want for that, so
no worries. And it's not like he won't be hearing all of this anyway. And all this shit.
Exactly.
So I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, you'll hear it later. But all right, let's go ahead and end this here. So.